This is review of trigonometric ratios. We are going to use SOH CAH TOA. So S stands for the sine, O stands for the opposite, H stands for the hypotenuse. Now you can abbreviate that by writing O divided by H. CAH. C stands for cosine, A stands for the adjacent, H stands for the hypotenuse, which can be written as A divided by H. TOA. T stands for tangent, O stands for the opposite, A stands for the adjacent, which can be written as O divided by A. Now that we know our ratios, we want to identify our side of the right triangle. The side next to the angle or theta is called adjacent angle. And if we go across from theta to the opposite is really the opposite side. So traveling from the index, if you just put your index finger here and go across, you're going to see the opposite side. And finally, our hypotenuse is the longest side in our right triangle. Why is it right triangle? You see the box right here that tells you that's a right triangle or 90 degrees. So that's hypotenuse. Now we're going to look at right triangle that has a side of 3, 4, and 5. And we really would like to define sine, cosine, tangent, and we're going to actually define all the 6 trigonometric ratios. The first one is sine. Sine of the angle. Sine is really opposite divided by hypotenuse. That's O divided by H. Now remember that our opposite side is 4 and our hypotenuse is 5, therefore we have 4 over 5. Cosine of the angle or cosine of the theta is adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. Cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 3 divided by 5. Lastly, our tangent theta is opposite divided by adjacent. Opposite divided by adjacent. Opposite is 4, adjacent is 3, therefore we have 4 divided by 3. Now that we know the 3 trig ratios, sine, cosine, and tangent, we would like to find their reciprocals. The reciprocal of the sine is cosecant angle. Remember that our sine is so opposite over hypotenuse, and if you just flip that, you're going to get H divided by O. In other words, instead of 4 over 5, we will get 5 over 4. The numerator goes in the denominator goes in the numerator. Now, let's look at the reciprocal of the cosine. That's called secant or sec theta. Now, all we have to do is flip it once and you will get the secant. So A over H becomes H over A, and 3 over 5 becomes 5 over 3. So this is really good. If you're given this secant and you flip it, you're gonna get cosine. If you flip cosine, you're gonna get secant. Lastly, the reciprocal of the tangent theta or tangent of the angle is really cotangent. Remember, tangent is TOA, opposite over adjacent, which was 4 over 3. Now our cotangent is equal to A over O. And the ratio is 3 divided by 4, which is the reciprocal of the tangents. Now that we know the 6 trig functions, we're going to look at a unit circle. So let me ask you a question. What is a unit circle? Okay, I think you guessed it right. It has a unit. In other words, the length from the origin to the edge of the circle or the perimeter of the circle is 1, no matter how you go. As long as you start from the origin and you go to the edge of the circle, you're going to get 1. Let's look at them. Okay, we have 0, 1. We have negative 1, 0. You probably say, we got negative 1 here. Okay, remember that negative number here is indicating that we are moving to the left. The length is always positive. The distance is always positive. This is a unit circle. The unit is going to be 1, no matter where we go from, as long as we start from the origin to the edge of the circle. So let's go down this time, see what happens. Again, the distance is 1, or the length is 1. And even if we start at the origin and we go to any point on the circle, the radius is always going to be 1. And we're going to look at this right triangle, and we're going to call this angle theta. And we're going to pick a point, any point in this case, and we're going to call it xy. So x is any number, y is just another number, which is really, in this case, our x represents the adjacent and the y is the opposite. So remember that adjacent is next to the angle and the opposite is really across the angle. And we're going to use the unit circle and this special right triangle in the unit circle, which has a lot of application in graphing and finding trigonometric equations later on when you study advanced topics. But if you ace this topic, you will be unstoppable. So let's look at the sine one more time. So we're going to review here. We're going to say sine is opposite over hypotenuse is so opposite is y and hypotenuse is 1. So you got y over 1. And this is really cool because we have the sine of the angle is really the y coordinate on the unit circle. Try the cosine right now. Okay, I guess you got it right. Cosine of the angle is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Why? Because cosine is CA. Adjacent over hypotenuse. X divided by 1 is just x. So the x coordinate is the cosine and the y coordinate is the sine value. Lastly, we have the tangent. Tangent is TOA, opposite over adjacent, which is really equal to y, the opposite side of the angle, divided by adjacent side of the angle. Okay, so now we know how to identify our sine, cosine, tangent on our unit circle. Let's look at this, something that you already know. X squared plus y squared equal 1. Remember from algebra that when the sum of square of the two legs of a right triangle is equal to hypotenuse. So x squared plus y squared is equal to 1. Now, how are we going to use this in trigonometry? Well, easy. Now, it's unbelievable. If you substitute these values, x is equal to cosine and y is equal to sine, you're going to come up with one of the most important and fundamental equations in trigonometry. And from there on, you could find all other trigonometric identities. And let's see if you could do that. Cosine is x, remember that. So therefore, we have x is equal to cosine, because x is squared, cosine is squared. And because y is squared, sine is squared. So remember that all you have to do is substitute x for cosine and y for the sine. And when you're squaring it, just remember that please make sure that we put the square directly above the cosine and also directly above the sine. Do not put this sine, do not put the square on top of the angle. Thanks for watching. Please make sure that you watch more videos on trigonometric ratios in future, and I'll see you in the next video.